So guys, welcome back our What If Naruto Was Oberons Duty Lucy and Erza a slave movie. Where the hell are we? Naruto asked as he looked around the strange room he suddenly found himself in. 1 minute, he was training with Sasuke, Sakura, and Sai while Kakashi watched on, and the next, he found himself here. He did notice all the sweat he had accumulated over the few hours they had sparred was now completely gone, turning around to see who else was here. His eyes landed on his team, but he almost had a stroke when he saw his father along with the other cage. Dad? He asked in shock, how are you here? I'm not sure, Lord First, Second. He asked, hoping they would know. Hashirama blinked in surprise and paid the man no mind as he began looking around. Tobirama did the same, though he stood in the same spot with only his eyes darting around the room. Red eyes suddenly landed on the lone Uchiha in the room, and the most awkward staring contest ensued. Sasuke stared back at the second Hokage with a bored expression and looked away. There's no exit, I can't feel anyone nearby either. Before Naruto could say anything, more people joined the fray. The room suddenly expanded without warning. 6 more people joined them. This time, none of them were familiar. 3 women and 3 men who seemed just as lost as the group of shinobi. The one that caught Naruto's attention, however, was the busty Reed. Her eyes locked onto Naruto, and they widened in surprise and shock. Without warning, she rushed over and jumped into the air, crossing the distance between them. Instinctually, his arms came up to catch her by the thighs as they wrapped around his body. Before he had a chance to register what was happening, her lips were pressed onto his with her tongue quickly slipping into his mouth. Does your son know that girl? Tobirama asked Minato. I'm not sure, he replied unsurely. Everyone could see him responding to the kiss as if no one was watching, and was sure it would continue had it not been for a loud clap from above them. Breaking the kiss, Erza looked up to see who had interrupted her with a frown. Strangely, there was just the shape of a person with no distinguishable features. Apologies for disturbing your moment, Miss Scarlet. However, that isn't the Naruto you know. You're all here because I want this version of Naruto along with his people, to see what it's like for him in another world, your world. Erza looked back at the man who she had just kissed with wide fearful eyes. Do you know who I am? Naruto shook his head dumbly. He watched as Erza quickly hopped off of him and bowed to him before turning around with tears in her eyes. I've just cheated Naruto and made you do it with me. Please hit me as punishment. The blonde looked back at his friends and former cage with a confused expression on his face. I don't know what is going on. Luckily, the host was able to get things back on track. Please, take a seat. Everyone found themselves seated on a comfortable chair with a large book being placed in Erza's lap. You will begin to read, and we will continue at random. It would be wise to pay attention, as what you will see is what happens in your immediate future. Makarov's head swiveled to the book that would tell them the future. He would be able to stop Natsu from causing more property damage. Wiping her eyes, Erza opened the book and began to read, trying to ignore the look her lover's double was giving her. It had been a few days since Eisenwald's attempted attack on the Guildmasters Conference in Clover Town. The event had been big news, and those from Fairy Tail who had been involved had been plastered all over the news, including the newest fairy, Lucy. The girl simultaneously loved and hated the new attention she got. More than a few of her admirers didn't care so much about her achievements as her looks, and that was infuriating. She would have to learn to deal with it, she supposed. After talking to both Mira and Erza about it, neither seemed to even really understand what she was complaining about, which seemed fitting in retrospect. Erza was randomly dense at times, despite being extremely sharp at others, and Mira was a swimsuit model, so she had been used to the attention for years. Even if the two noticed the attention their looks got, it seemed like they couldn't care less. Most of the men turned to look at the women and mentally nodded. They would definitely get looks back home too. What's Fairy Tail? Naruto asked. Erza looked up from the book. It's our guild, we're all a part of it and take jobs to fund it and keep it active, as well as make a living. The shinobi nodded. It sounded similar to a village though on a much smaller scale. Lucy was still proud of her successes in helping during such an event though. While she might not have been one of the heavy hitters like Erza, Gray, or Natsu, she knew she had helped. Erza herself had pointed out her usage of Virgo had been what allowed them to escape that barrier at the station. It was really something to be so accepted as part of the guild after such a short time. They really were like a family. She had begun to remember even the more forgettable guild members' names. That being said, she was still getting accustomed to the various quirks each of her guild members displayed. Like this afternoon, Erza and Natsu were going to be fighting, something that made her nervous after seeing the destruction those two could accomplish on their own. The shinobi were curious as to what this Virgo was as well as the barrier they seemed to be stuck in. Glancing at the strange people, they also realized that they must have used some sort of different energy to do battle. Since the story had begun, there had been no mention of chakra. Naruto glanced over at Erza and wondered how she was connected to him. Their host had said that he wasn't her Naruto, which meant he had to exist in some capacity there too. If the kiss she had given him upon seeing him was any indication, he would say that he and her were in some kind of physical relationship. Now that I think about it, it might not actually be safe to watch those two fight, Lucy thought while biting her lip as everyone began heading outside the guild for the spar. I can't believe they're going through with this, Lucy said in shock as the two wizards geared up to fight in the street. You guys just allow fighting on normal populated streets? Minato asked in confusion. The shortest one of the group, a bald old man with white hair on the sides of his head and a mustache, pinched his nose and exhaled loudly. The previous cage could all empathize with the man, as he clearly dealt with nonsense on a daily basis. He nodded, we don't, but children these days don't listen, even after deducting pay they continue to do it. Tsunade snorted, believe me, I know all about troublesome kids who don't listen, she said, glancing at Naruto. Oh hey Lucy. The ever-kind Murahan greeted the new fairy tale member. Well if those two value their manhood they better go through with it. Elfman grunted. Erza's not a man though, Mira said to her brother. But you have to admit she's manly, joked Mikau as he joined the group. Aren't any of you worried this could tear our strongest team apart? Lucy asked as she turned back to the two fighters in the center of the crowd. What are you talking about? Our strongest team? Gray asked in confusion. You, Natsu, and Erza, you dummy, you're the three strongest wizards in the guild right? The girl snapped. PFFT, what idiot fed you that line? Gray asked with a laugh only to wince when Mira turned away upset with his words, and not that you're an idiot Mira. Gray said, trying to comfort the guild's barmaid. You should really think before you speak, you know, Sai told Gray who looked away. Team 7 all turned to look at Sai with blank faces, out of everyone, he was the last one who should be talking about thinking before they speak. Wait, so there's people stronger than them? Hashirama asked, if that was true, why label them as the strongest team, young lady? The god of shinobi asked the white-haired woman. Mira smiled kindly, because as far as teams go, they are the strongest member of the guild is hardly around, and the others don't team up. That made sense, they supposed. Tobirama however, was still curious to see what these people could do, they weren't chakra users, but something else entirely. Ah, well it'll hand it to Natsu and Gray, they're tough little dudes, but neither of them are even close to being our strongest members, Lucy, Elfman pointed out. Having been listening in nearby, Levi and the rest of Team Shadowgear stepped over to join the conversation. As far as saying Erza is the strongest female wizard in the guild, that's a pretty safe bet, but well, Levi started, then glanced at her team members. You're the strongest female? Tsunade and Sakura asked, it was nice to see other women getting the respect they deserve for their power, Tsunade had held that title for a while herself. I suppose I am, the Redeed responded evenly. Wow, Naruto whistled, now we have the two strongest women from both worlds with us, you and Sakura. Tsunade frowned, the strongest woman in our world, she didn't mean for it to come out as bragging, but it was the way it was. Naruto shrugged, just repeating what they've been saying in Konoha. The busty blonde felt a vein in her forehead pulse, and with an accusatory point, she replied, that's you're the they in question. Naruto's smirk was all that was needed to confirm her suspicion. Sakura looked over at her teammate with a shake of her head, but smiled nonetheless, it filled her with pride that one of the two strongest men in their world really saw her as the new strongest. Hiruzen, who had been quiet up until now, cleared his throat and requested that they get back to it. They'd say either Laxus or Mystigan, well now anyway with those other guys gone, Jet said though he mumbled the last part, getting a knowing glance from most of the other members, confusing Lucy. Alright let's get this show on the road. Natsu bellowed from the center of the crowd only to be met with murmuring. We are waiting for the master, Natsu, though honestly I thought he would be out here by now, Erza said before looking around with more focused eyes, trying to pick Makarov out. The cheers died down, and murmurs took their place as everyone looked around for Makarov so they could get the fight started. After several moments of waiting, some of the crowd even began to grow impatient and leave to carry out their daily business, the guild members all seemed confused. I don't get it, where's Gramps? I just talked to him like 5 minutes ago, what, did he get lost on the walk to the front door or something? Natsu complained, getting a painful pop on the back of his head from Erza who glared at him. Natsu felt a large fist bop him atop his head, though it lacked any real power behind it, it still made his neck hurt. What the hell Gramps? He yelled, holding his bruised head. I swear kids these days have no respect, he grumbled, getting agreeing nods from Kakashi, Tsunade, and Tobirama. No need to send out a search party for me kids, I was just greeting some family members who have been gone for quite a while, I think you will all be happy to see them, Makarov said with a slight chuckle as he slipped out the door to the guild hall. What do you mean, master? Who are you talking about? Mira asked, cocking her head to the side slightly, only to gasp when the old man flicked the door open wider. Standing before the guild members was a girl that bore striking similarities to the Strauss siblings in Lucy's opinion. She didn't get much of a chance to ask about it before things fell into chaos. The guild swept forward and practically dogpiled the poor girl, further shocking Lucy by their reaction, left with little choice. Lucy turned to one of the few wizards who didn't rush forward with the rest, the same person who had brought her to the guild hall earlier to see Erza and Natsu fight. "Bray, what's going on, who is that?" Lucy asked while turning again to watch the chaos happening in the doorway of the guild hall. "Ah, I guess you won't know, would you? That is Lysana Strauss, Mira and Elfman's little sister. We all thought that. What I mean is, I guess we just haven't seen her in a few years," Gray said, fighting back his emotions despite some happy tears welling up in his eyes. Lysana Mira cried happily. She would get to see her sister again. Those from Fairy Tail had varying degrees of waterworks, with Mirahin being the most notable. It seemed this Lysana person was very important to everyone. It also showed the difference between worlds, whereas the young lady was welcomed back with open arms. If this were Konoha, there would be an interrogation at the very least to confirm they were who they claimed. Sasu could only wonder what it would be like to see his brother again, but he knew he wouldn't be that fortunate. Still, as happy of a moment as this was, he also wanted to see what kind of power these people used. That answered her question, but made her a bit more confused too. Everyone was acting a little too extreme for having simply missed someone for a few years. It was easy to see there was more to the story. "Alright you brats, that's enough. Now I'm sure we all have plenty of things to ask Lysana, but she has been through a lot, and I think it's only right that her brother and sister speak with her first. Natsu and Happy too, I guess." Makarov mumbled the last part, seeing as he doubted he could pry the boys off of the girl, now that they had her in their embrace. Those four had missed her far more than any of the others, so it was only right they got the first chance to catch up. "Something going on there?" Naruto wondered with a grin. Natsu, however, didn't pick up on his teasing tone and simply stared back. "What are you talking about?" The blonde glanced at his people and then at the other members of Fairy Tail who simply shook their heads. "Don't bother, man," Gray replied with a defeated tone. The crowd dispersed and filed into the guild, while Natsu, Happy, and the reunited Strauss siblings headed off into a private room. Lucy turned to Erza who stood nearby. She seemed happy that Lysana was back, but also a bit disappointed in something, as everyone else seemed to be heading off, though Lucy figured she was the best bet of figuring out what had everyone acting so emotional. "Erza," Lucy began, only to feel a light tap from the guildmaster as he approached the retreat. "Erza, I think you had best head into my office. Someone is," Makarov said, only to stop as he saw the door swing open and a man step out of his office. "Always so impatient," Makarov chuckled warmly, knowing neither Erza or the young man in the doorway could hear him. Lucy was stunned once again as she saw Erza break out into a wide smile. Despite the tears that began running down her face, Lucy didn't even get a chance to ask who it was before she watched him cast some spell, causing a single sunflower to grow in his hand. As the man held it out, the fearsome Titania bolted forward and all but leapt into his arms, wrapping her own tightly around his neck and pulling him down into a flurry of kisses. Lucy watched on in wonder as the man broke out into laughter and wrapped large arms around Erza, hoisting her up off the ground and spinning in place. Several others had taken notice by now, and murmurs had begun as the crowd grew once again. "Hey, it's Naruto," one voice whispered. "There I am," Naruto pointed out. At the same time, a holographic image of that world's Naruto showed up in front of them, and it was almost a one-to-one copy of the young man. Now they could see why Erza had given him the same treatment as the one in the book. "Minato," Hiruzen called out, "it seems your son has picked up a liking for deeds." The older blonde smiled fondly at the uncanny resemblance between him and his son. This young woman also had red hair, though darker than Kushina's, but the resemblance was there all the same. "Even in our world," Sakura began, only to stop when Naruto elbowed her side. Did she want Erza to hear that? "Yeah, I figured Oberon would be back with Lysana. He said he would," another said. "Oberon?" Naruto wondered, was that his last name? "Man, I really thought that they were both a third started." "Shut up. That's Oberon you're talking about," the second voice reprimanded the third. "Oberon, king of the fairies, like Titania is the queen. No wonder Erza acted the way she did," Lucy thought as she watched the blonde man set Erza back down on her feet. As soon as he did, he took a solid-looking punch to the bicep as Erza's happy expression turned to a scowl. Sasuke and Sai shared matching grins, which was strange for the pair, but both soon turned to Naruto. "You're a fairy," both men clowned at the same time. The blonde covered his face with a single hand to avoid facing the shinobi. He had fought the strongest being in his universe, overcome adversity on a daily basis, and had even brought peace to the world, all to be called a fairy. "Come on now," Hashirama tried, doing his best to come up with a way to spin the story to make it sound more masculine for the young man. "It's not a bad nickname." Naruto stared blankly at them, ignoring the snickering from his friends. The god of shinobi, the second Hokage, the professor, the yellow flash, the slug princess. He listed off the nicknames of the cage, turning to Kakashi. He added Kakashi of the Sharingan, all cool nicknames that struck fear into people. Sai smiled, "And now we have the king of fairies." That incited another round of laughs from the shinobi, and while Minato did his best not to laugh, he couldn't stop the chuckles from escaping him. Erza placed a hand on his back and rubbed soothingly. It's a good name, one that lets people know how much you mean to the guild, she said. She hadn't noticed that she had taken his hand in hers and quickly let go, reminding herself this was not her boyfriend. We all thought you and Lysana were dead. Last we heard was you were staying in Acheron to finally finish your quest, and the next we hear is the city was wrecked and hundreds were dead. Then when I saw Lysana I hoped, and you weren't with her, and Erza started to break down only for the blonde man to wipe at her tears. I'm so sorry Erza, really I am. I sent so many letters after the Acheron incident. I realized you weren't getting them a few months later. When we heard about the funeral held for us, we wanted to come back, but we had to finish the quest. We were so close, and we could lose our lead, Naruto explained, calming her down, at least a little. I thought you were dead, Erza mumbled as she leaned into his embrace, again letting her head rest against his chest. You've changed so much too. You too Erza, you're even more beautiful than when I left, Naruto replied as one hand wrapped around his lover's slender waist and his free hand gently combed through her long scarlet locks. I'm back now though, that is if you're still my partner of course, he said, chuckling as she slapped his shoulder. She didn't need to correct him, no matter how far or for how long, Erza would always be waiting to reunite with him. He knew it too, even if it sparked some guilt about the length of his absence this time, and that's not even mentioning the fact that she and the others thought him to be dead. So where was he? Kakashi asked. They had mentioned Acheron, but without the knowledge of their world, that was all but useless to them. All will be revealed in time, the host spoke. Getting the hint, everyone quieted down and let Erza continue. We have so much to catch up on. First, though, our team has grown bigger, Natsu, Happy, and Gray you all know, but this is Lucy, and she is new to the guild and our team, Erza said as she snatched Lucy's hand and pulled the startled and blushing blonde over to the king of the fairies. Naruto took in the girl's appearance and smiled at her. She was obviously very new to the guild still. Along with it she was a couple years younger than himself and Erza. He could sense she had a sizable amount of magic as he took her hand and shook it, and her ridiculously stacked assets made one hell of an impression on him. Magic? Sasuke muttered, taking a look at the white-haired girl next to him. He spoke again. How does that work? Mira tapped her chin and thought, well, everyone has some sort of magic, whether it be celestial keys in Lucy's case, or fire in Natsu's. It really depends on the individual. Do you need a medium to channel it? Or does it just respond to your intent? He followed up, now curious as to how this worked. Perhaps there was a chance that a Sharingan could somehow copy this magic. Mira blinked. You guys don't use magic, what exactly do you use? You will have a moment to discuss amongst yourselves at the end of the chapter, the host interrupted once again. We can talk later, Mira whispered. Erza had her beat though, and as nice as it was to meet a new recruit to the guild, especially one as attractive as her, Naruto was a little more interested in catching up with a girlfriend he hadn't seen in 2 years. It's great to meet you Lucy, I hope we get to know each other well, but for now I really want to go catch up with Erza, if that's alright with you old man, Naruto finished as he turned to his guild master. Go on, I'm sure Erza has kept your place in tip-top shape while you were gone, Naruto, Makarov said with a knowing smile. He then turned to corral the guild members and let the leaders of the next generation get reacquainted properly. Erza waved goodbye to Lucy as she led the way, tugging Naruto along by his arm. The blonde man shot a smile towards several guild members who were waving at him as he passed and let the Riti take the lead. It didn't take long to reach the house, and Naruto smiled softly as he looked at everything. It was clear Erza had moved into his home from Fair Hills at some point. She had pretty much lived with him already before he had left on his mission, so that was fine. She had taken care of everything, just as he expected her to. Even his plants looked vibrant and healthy, which made him happy. That's adorable, Sakura said with awe, knowing that the woman never lost hope. Erza set about putting the sunflower he had grown for her into a vase and set it in the windowsill before turning back to him and slowly making her way across the room. She slid into another tight embrace with her lover. Naruto and his red-haired companion shared a long deep kiss filled with emotion, different than the frantic hungry ones earlier. It was like he was using it to tell her he wasn't about to leave her again. Once they broke the kiss, he pecked her forehead before kissing the top of her head. I'm so happy you're home, she mumbled into his chest. I'm happy to be home too, I'm here to stay too, we managed to achieve our goal, so I'm back to remake Team Royal, Naruto said, getting a light squeeze from the girl as he mentioned reforming their team. She leaned back and caught his lips again. It was a mix of the loving tender kiss he had given her a moment ago and the starved kisses earlier. As they kissed, their hands began to roam across the familiar territory of one another's bodies. 2 years apart from one another had taken their toll, and they both had plenty of pent-up desire rushing to release. Now Naruto knew exactly why the woman had accosted him the moment she saw him. The projection showed everyone exactly what was going on, and Naruto found it difficult to believe he was actually feeling jealous of himself. He wondered briefly if the projection would show the entire scene he figured was coming, or only moments. If this really was a one-for-one copy of him, that meant that Sakura and Tsunade would be seeing his junk. Well, he had nothing to be ashamed of, he still didn't want this to be how someone saw it. Glancing at Sai, his eyes narrowed, but he shrugged shortly after. At least this would put those ridiculous rumors the man had started to rest. As Naruto removed his shirt, Erza paused. Ever since they were 15, Naruto had begun getting tattoos. He said that every event in his life required a mark of some kind, whether it was a scar or a tattoo. She knew most of them. The first tattoo had been of the blade his father had been known for, and the chains that made his mother famous tangled up in one another. They had both been killed when Naruto was young, and Erza had been told by him that following that was when he had met her at the Tower of Heaven, a fellow slave. Instead of a tattoo, his time as a slave was remembered by the deep scars on his wrists and neck from the shackles and collar he had been made to wear as a punishment. They had dug in and cut deeply into his skin. Along with that was a tattoo of the tower itself on his left forearm, a broken chain surrounding it, recalling his freedom from the tower. Erza had been there alongside him for both their time as slaves and their newfound freedom. "You don't have tattoos, do you, Naruto?" Sakura asked, looking at his exposed forearms. "Nah, unless you count the seal on my stomach as a tattoo." The fairy tale guild symbol proudly took up residence on his upper arm just like Erza's own, except his was a deep red. These Erza knew well, had them all since he was 15. The next was the lightning-like pattern scar along his left side originating from a narrow cut. He had gotten that from the first time they had to separate after joining the guild. She still didn't know the full story, but he had gotten it while retrieving Lisana from where she had ended up after her disappearance. "You have more new ones," she said simply as her hand glided across his skin, tenderly touching the 3 new marks. "Let me tell you about them, the big scar too," he said as he patted the lightning mark he had on the side. "I've heard that tattoos are addictive, looks like that's been proven," Tobirama said with a shake of his head. To him, unless the tattoo served some sort of purpose, it was useless. Hashirama sighed at his brother's words. The man was far too uptight for his own good. "I think they're neat, they're a symbol of his history so that he never forgets. I think a tree would look good on me." Tsunade's sweat dropped at her grandfather's words. The man had seemingly forgotten that he was dead, and a tattoo would do him little good. They stepped over to the couch, and Naruto pulled the girl into his lap so that she was lying across him. He took her hand in his and slowly traced the first scar, that same large lightning mark. "I never told you how exactly I got this or what happened when I went to get Lisana back. There was a reason for that, but I cleared it with the master, and I can tell you about the whole thing now," Naruto said. Erza was silent, but she gently trailed a finger down the winding paths that made up the scar. She never pried into the matter, knowing he would tell her when or if he could. "Lisana obviously didn't die when she disappeared. You were the only one to agree with me on that except for Mystigan. He told me he had a lead and we investigated it together. He was right in the end. Lisana had been accidentally transported to another world similar to our own. It was so weird, there were alternate versions of us there, but they were all wrong. The other versions of you and me were terrible people. They were enforcers for a tyrant but extremely powerful warriors," Naruto explained. By now Erza's eyes were locked on his face seeing the bother there. "So an opposite world?" Minato asked out loud. The thought of fighting evil versions of his comrades flashed through his mind, though in the shinobi world, everyone felt that they were justified in what they were doing. "I've heard of it," Makarov replied. "I've never been there myself though. I'm curious how Naruto got there to begin with. I'm more curious as to what kind of magic this Naruto uses. My guess is that it's some sort of wind-based techniques," Sasuke added. Kakashi agreed, their Naruto's affinity was wind, so the most likely magic element would be the same, that or cloning as that was the blonde's bread and butter. "The scar?" she asked. "Yeah, from the other me, I left a similar mark on his chest after he trailed off." "After what?" she asked. "I killed the other you, she was about to kill Lisana and I reacted, I stabbed her in the chest, and the other me went berserk, not that I blame him, if someone had taken you from me." Naruto again trailed off. "You had to kill your girlfriend?" Tsunade asked, that had to leave some sort of trauma. They looked at Naruto who stared back confused. "I don't know why you're looking at me, I've been with you the whole time." Erza chuckled and Naruto found he quite liked hearing it. The Redeed noted that both her Naruto and this one had similar mannerisms, it made her feel like he never left. Erza squeezed his hand gently to comfort him. She couldn't imagine that having to kill a doppelganger of her lover would be hard enough, but facing her own self, furious at the loss of him, would be terrible too. "He managed to injure me the same time I injured him. The last thing I remember before coming back to our world with Lisana was him running off with the other you in his arms. I could only see us in that situation, and it made it easy to agree with the master when he told me to keep what happened a secret," Naruto said, a bit guilty because he had kept it from her. Erza pecked him on the chest and leaned her head against him while chuckling. He was far too hard on himself. Anyway, a few months after getting back we found out the machine used to get to the other world and back had been stolen by some soldiers from the kingdom of Carnold, Naruto explained. Hashirama sighed, things can never be simple, can they? The shinobi shook their heads, not where Naruto is concerned, no, Sakura replied. Why would they come all that way to steal it? It's on the other side of the continent, Erza asked, leaning back up to look in his eyes. Simple, it made gateways to other worlds. Imagine the possibilities of stealing advanced technology or resources from an entirely different reality, and since Carnold was in the middle of a civil war, they could definitely use it, Naruto explained. So that's why you went all the way out there, but why take Lysana if you were walking into a war zone? She wasn't that strong and could have been killed, I would have been a better choice and she stopped talking at the look her lover gave her. Erza, you need to have more faith in our friends, they are stronger than you realize, besides, Lysana is my student, she needed to learn skills by experience, as for you coming, we are the royals of the guild, you know the master uses us to keep things in check, I knew I would be gone for a year at least. We couldn't both be absent for more than a few months before things went to chaos around here, or more chaos than usual, he explained, and Erza sighed, she wasn't happy, but when it came to this Naruto always had logic on his side. Naruto keeping things in check. Kakashi wondered, well, we know there's some differences. Maybe Hess actually where he says hell beyond time, Sasuke shot back, still upset over their teacher's tardiness. Bray scratched his head in confusion, wait, so is this Naruto that much different from ours? They look about the same. Mira nodded, my guess is there will be slight personality differences along with the power they have, they don't use magic like we do, other than that it seems like Hess the same. Go on then, you went after the device, Erza urged getting into his story. Yeah, well there was a civil war, and we ended up just trying to help people caught in the middle of it. At the front of the conflict though were the 5 generals, the king had made his 3 children and 2 others into pawns, for his attempt to break the spirit of his people. I guess he married the queen, and after they had their kids he essentially took over when she died, even though their eldest child, their daughter, should have become queen, the war was brutal, and eventually I ended up helping the rebels which were secretly under 2 of the generals' command overthrow the king. In the battle for Acheron, I faced off against one of the generals for the final time. He had been turned into a living weapon by the king and had extremely powerful god slayer magic. He had a brand on his forehead, the symbol for his people's word for love. It was to represent that he could only love himself. Even after his sister tried to talk him down in the end I had to kill him to protect innocence. So I had the same mark put here to remember him and to promise to help the next person I find in a similar state as him, Naruto said as he tapped the mark on his chest over his heart. God slayer magic? Tobirama asked, taking a lot more interest now, did this dimension have people whose sole purpose was to kill gods? It's a kind of magic it's really difficult to explain exactly how it works, Mir replied. Naruto listened in, trying to get an understanding of their magic, but quickly pushed those thoughts out of his mind as Erza's words registered in his mind, a brand on the forehead that means love. That was basically describing Gaara, were the others there too? This, he said, pointing to the fan on his right arm, and this he pointed at the Hergless shape on his right arm, the same place as the fairy tale mark, but on his opposite arm. They are the marks of the Carnold royal family and Carnold kingdom respectively, I kin to have status equal to that of their royal guard, he turned sheepish as he admitted that. What? She asked. Well I said I eventually sided with the rebels, they sort of named me an honorary member of the royal guard once the queen took her rightful place, Naruto explained, causing the Redeed to laugh at the ridiculousness that Naruto always got himself pulled into. I remember why I miss doing missions with you so much now, she said as she laughed. Naruto grinned as his hand slid down her sides and wrapped around her hips, pulling her snugly to him. She gasped as she felt the bulge in his pants pressing against her crotch as he pulled her up into a position where she straddled him. There's no way we're about to hear about their intimate moment, right? Tsunade asked. Well she was glad Naruto had found someone, she really didn't want to hear about the man she considered a grandson getting it on with someone. Erza's eyes trailed down the page, and her cheeks quickly turned red at what she saw. The others looked awkward, knowing that they would likely be listening to Naruto getting it on with his girlfriend. Let's just get through it quickly, Naruto mumbled. Sakura adjusted herself in her seat, she wouldn't say she was looking forward to it, but there was a deep part of her that had wondered just what it would be like, with the amount of time the two had spent together over the years, it was only natural she would wonder on occasion, not that she would ever admit that. Is that all you missed? He asked as he whispered huskily into her ear. Erza grinned back at him as she decided to fight fire with fire, and slowly began to find against him, both moaned, having not had release in so long despite being at their sexual prime. Let me show you exactly how badly I missed you, she said as she began kissing her way down his chest and sliding off his lap. Her long nimble fingers easily undid the belt he wore and unfastened his pants. With a tug she pulled his underwear down, and his cock popped her in the face as it flopped free. Here's inside, it's a good thing Jiraiya isn't here. Tsunade felt a tinge of sadness at the mention of her deceased teammate, but she also agreed with her teacher. He would likely be giggling like a schoolgirl and taking notes. "Oh my," Mira said, covering her mouth. She glanced over at the shinobi next to her to see his reaction. Her teammates all looked awkward, with Gray and Natsu turning a dark shade of red and Makarov trying to fall asleep. Sasuke looked bored, though it was likely to try to distract himself while they got through the section. Naruto, she noted, was glancing at Erza, and his eyes were trailing up and down her body. She almost laughed at the thought of her boyfriend, finding out that another version of him was checking her out. "Oh, you've gotten bigger in the last couple of years," she said as she caressed his dick and let it lean against her face, easily reaching from the bottom of her chin to past her hairline. "Damn," Sakura whispered, only to clamp her mouth with a hand when she saw Tsunade and more embarrassingly, Naruto's dad, look over at her. "I'm not the only one," he said, leaning forward to grab Erza's shirt and tear it open. She normally would have been angry at him ruining a perfectly good shirt, but now that her tits were free, she simply wrapped them around his cock and smiled and began playing with him. "Odd, Erza, you're even softer than I remember," Naruto groaned as she began bouncing her tits around his cock. She didn't let up as she pressed forward and caught his head in her mouth. She sucked hard, getting a wheeze from her lover at the surprising action, before she let it go again with a loud wet pop. She did it again and again, before moving her tits out of the way and taking as much of him into her mouth as possible. Erza had to take a moment to get herself under control. She wasn't so much embarrassed about the act itself as she had done it with him plenty, but reading it out loud to everyone including her friends was not helping. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see Mira with a blush on her cheeks and Lucy's wide-eyed stare. Natsu and Gray were doing their best to keep their composure, but she could still see their minds picturing what was going on. Her only saving grace was that there was no image appearing for everyone to see. Naruto had already all but trained her throat when they had been together before he left. Her throat remembered his shape, but he truly had grown in the last 2 years, and her neck bulged with the thick meat being driven into it. As she came up for air, she let out a squeak of shock as Naruto grabbed her around the waist and flipped her up onto him. Now laying on the couch with his girlfriend's pussy in his face, Naruto tore her panties off with his teeth alone, before attacking her pussy like a ravenous beast. His head disappeared within her skirt as she bucked hard against his face in pleasure. She had forgotten just how skilled of a lover he was as he already had her nearing her first orgasm within a handful of moments. Refusing to be beaten that easily, she wrapped her lips around his cock once more and slid down its length, taking more and more into her tight throat until she felt the tip of her nose brush up against his balls. Slowly she backed off, all while sucking as hard as she could. They both licked and sucked at one another, driving the other closer and closer to orgasm. Soon Erza felt the telltale twitch from Naruto's dick as it neared release, and the thought made her own pussy begin clenching as an orgasm rolled through her as well. "Is it getting hot in here or is it just me?" Mira whispered. Her guildmates didn't respond, and the shinobi didn't seem to be much better. She noted that the older blonde, who seemed to be Naruto's father, looked on with an awkward smile. Mira could only guess he was both proud and a bit uncomfortable listening to what his son was doing. Aburama clicked his teeth in annoyance and leaned back into his chair. He was no stranger to sex, having been with plenty of women over his tenure as Hokage, but he really didn't need to be hearing about the young man's exploit with his girlfriend. He wanted to hear more about this magic they used. As ropes of hot cum shot straight down her throat, Naruto drank up her fluids, enjoying the familiar flavor of his woman. The pair slowly broke apart, Erza sucking the remnants of any cum from his dick and licking it clean. They loved the taste of one another, and they were far from done with one another. Naruto dropped his pants while Erza simply tore her shirt off the rest of the way, leaving her in nothing but a short blue skirt that Naruto hiked up on her torso as he lifted her off the ground. Erza's legs naturally wrapped around her man's waist as he positioned his cock for her opening and dropped her into position. It hurt slightly, but the pain was drowned out by the pleasure that swept over her body, and she clenched onto his body as her pussy did the same for his cock that had just bottomed out inside her. She screamed in pleasure, and before she could even catch her breath, Naruto began pounding into her hard and fast, like an animal. His roaring of pleasure and her banshee-like howl of ecstasy could be heard by their neighbors as they were united properly for the first time in years. He carried her over to the table and laid her down on it, leaving her at perfect height for him to thrust into her opening without issue. She entwined her fingers with his, and they slowed their pace slightly from reckless animalistic rutting to deep loving thrusts. "Man, we've eaten at that table," Natsu whined. "It hasn't happened yet, Natsu," Erza reminded him, remembering that this was the future. She would make sure that table was spotless when Naruto returned. If they thought she was going to miss out on what would likely be some of the best sex of her life, they were sadly mistaken. Now she could even blow his mind even harder, since she knew what he would do. Naruto would be eating out of the palm of her hand. I missed you so much, I love you so much, Erza cried out as he drew to the very tip before pushing back and all the way to her cervix. I missed you too, baby, God I love you, he replied as he felt her pussy walls tighten around him, retaking the shape he had pounded into them before he had to leave. Them clothes. She said with a gasp, and Naruto leaned forward to catch her nipple in his mouth, sending her over the edge as she came around his cock. Naruto hoisted her up again and never stopping from their lovemaking as she almost looked to be seizing up on his dick, Naruto carried her to the bedroom and kicked the door shut behind him. He tossed her into the bed and flipped her over onto her hands and knees, as he sidled up behind her, he inserted himself with no issue as Erza tried to regain her senses, the poor girl hardly knew what was real anymore, as the pleasure of her lover taking her hard from behind swept through her body. They'd be surprised if anything other than her ending up pregnant happened, Hashirama commented casually. Naruto nodded, he hoped that would be the end result. I wonder what kind of powerhouse would be born between you two, Makarov hummed to himself, he shuddered a moment after, I can already imagine the property damage. She bit down on the blanket as Naruto pushed her face first into the bedding and pounded her like a beast from behind, he grunted roughly as he bucked into her, slapping her ass as he took her. As he continued to fuck her, he felt her pussy clench around him as she enjoyed another orgasm, and it proves to be too much for him, with a grunt he filled his lover with his seed. Slowing down his thrusts till he stopped, he leaned forward and kissed along her back, sending shivers through the reed as he did, sliding out of her and dropping onto the bed beside her, he took her into his arms as she laid her head against his chest while they both caught their breath. Soon both were kissing heatedly again, preparing for another round when they froze after hearing the front door bang open and footsteps. They stared at the bedroom door as it swung open, revealing a small man in a Magic Council uniform step arrogantly into the room. Erza covered herself with a blanket as Naruto began to step out of the bed, not caring for his nudity. Who just barges into another person's house like that? Sakura asked, even she had the forethought to knock. What if they did knock? Sasuke and Mira asked at the same time. Naruto shook his head, I think it'd have heard them knocking. Tsunade raised an eyebrow, how? You were too busy having unprotected sex with your girlfriend. Seriously Naruto, you really should be more careful, Sakura lectured, she'd given plenty of talks at the hospital to young women, all beginning to explore with their partners. But you hold your breath when you're eating. Naruto shot back, I didn't think so. Erza Scarlet you are to present yourself to the man began only to freeze as a sword materialized in the air held by Naruto and tapping at the man's throat. It just materialized. Minato muttered, some kind of pocket dimension to store weapons perhaps. I don't give a shit who sent you, get the fuck out of our house and never come barging in here again or I will kill you, Naruto snarled before a foot shot forward and caught the man in the chest and blasted him directly back out of the house through the front door. The power of the kick caused enough backblast that both the front door and bedroom doors swung shut behind him. I am gonna be having a fucking talk with whoever sent that little toad in here, Naruto said, shocked and furious that not only was he interrupted, but that someone was barging into his girl's bedroom, as if they owned the place. Nobody treated Erza like that. You said our house, Erza said as she stood and began getting dressed, much to Naruto's disappointment. Well yeah you obviously already moved in, Naruto replied as he began getting dressed too, unhappy that he didn't get another round at least. That's a relief I didn't think you would mind, well actually I thought that she took a breath, times had been hard when she thought she lost him, but he was back and they were picking up right where they left off. Wait, that's all it takes to move in with someone. Just leave your stuff at their house. Natsu asked in his usual dense tone. Makarov shook his head in exasperation, no Natsu, it takes more than that, he'll tell you when we're back. Let's handle this council shit and then get something nice for dinner, I want to hear about what you've been up to too, since you know what I've been doing now, Naruto suggested getting a nod from Erza. Soon both Oberon and Titania were dressed and heading to the guild, a terrified and pretty roughed up messenger limping beside them. Once they had reached the guild the majority of members had collected into the hall knowing something was up, a small group of local rune knights, those more than used to fairy tales, unique nature stood inside as well, the lieutenant grinning as he saw the condition of the uppity messenger from the council. That grin slipped off his face as he saw the stranger that had the beautiful Titania hanging off his arm, coupled by the disheveled appearance of their hair. He quickly realized whoever this was had been with the young woman he had his eyes on for the last 3 months. He felt jealous that some stranger had made progress where had met none, when the guild member warmly welcomed both of them. Ray scoffed, if that guy thought he had a chance with Erza, he was even more stupid than he thought. I wonder if he'll try something in front of Naruto, Natsu said with a grin, hoping he'd see a fight. I hope he does, Tobirama commented, much to the confusion of the others. Tsunade hoped the man would elaborate, but he didn't, why? To see what kind of magic Naruto uses, I know how he and his father fight, but this one uses magic, it might be completely different. Had never heard the name Naruto before, so it had to be some new recruit like the fine little blonde piece that had joined recently. Well, it wouldn't do for some little upstart brat to move in on what he wanted. "You there? Are you the one that assaulted the council's emissary? You're under arrest," he said as he stepped forward. The others glanced his way before following their boss lead. The lieutenant was sure Erza was the one to actually handle the little messenger man. She had a serious temper, and he was sure she was a real hellcat in his sack. "Yeah, I figured that much. I'll present myself to the council with Erza here. Just relax, Super Trooper," Naruto said dismissively. "No, you're gonna be going in wearing bracelets, punk," the lieutenant said, getting a snort from Naruto. "Looks like you'll be getting your wish," Hashirama told his brother. Truth be told, he was looking forward to this himself. Naruto had impressed him immensely while they had fought together in the war. He looked forward to seeing what the young man was capable of. Oberons didn't reply, but his eyes definitely zoned in on the display that had shown up in front of them. Sasuke did as well. He knew it was magic in this world, but he wanted to know if hand signs were still the primary trigger for techniques. His eyes turned red, 3 Tomo hypnotically spinning as he stared at the picture. "You're kidding, right? No way, this isn't some joke with that line. Either way though, I most definitely am not putting those cuffs on," Naruto scowled as he stepped away from Erza. "Don't worry, we'll do it for you," the lieutenant said as he moved to arrest Naruto. The guild had gone silent, but they glared menacingly at the Rune Knights and lieutenant in particular. The man had been coming around the guild acting like a big shot since he got assigned to Magnolia, only Makarov's order not to stir up trouble with him, and thereby the Knights overall kept the guild from booting his ass out the door. Naruto hadn't received the memo. But the flick of his wrist, a large hammer, one sparking with small flames, appears in his hand, and before the lieutenant could even flinch, he was sent through the back wall of the guild hall by Naruto with a single swing. "I was wrong, I guess. The only joke here was you," Naruto said as he looked at the other knights. "So no hand signs," Hiruzen noted. "I didn't see anything that indicated a technique had activated." "Perhaps we're missing something," Kakashi mused to himself. Makarov rubbed his chin and thought, like the shinobi, he too was curious as to how they fought. The way they were looking for a medium to channel power told him they needed something before they could use any of their power. Well, they didn't seem to be unfriendly, minus the young man with the red eyes and the white-haired man who occasionally glared at the former. He still didn't see it fit to reveal anything. He had it coming. One shouted and the group collectively raised their hands in surrender. Naruto scoffed, rolling his eyes as he put away his hammer and continued to walk with Erza over to the master, who seemed to be chuckling. Makarov had indeed told the guild not to start something with the knights, but he wasn't about to reprimand his children for standing up for themselves. As his comrades had said, the lieutenant had it coming. "Master, it seems Erza's gotta present herself to the council or some shit," Naruto said. Right, this messenger was here earlier looking for you, Erza. I see he chose not to follow my advice though," Makarov said, eyeing the tattered and dirty uniform and the bruise peeking out past his ripped collar that looked a lot like toes for some reason. "It's not a big deal, he'll be back tonight if you keep Natsu busy," Erza said with a motion with her chin toward the salamander, making his way toward the two of them. "The salamander?" Tsunade asked, her mind immediately thinking of Hanzo. Was he perhaps a water user? Natsu nodded. "That's my nickname back home." "Do you have a giant salamander by any chance?" she followed up. Natsu frowned. "What? No, why would I have a giant salamander?" Tsunade didn't respond, instead nodding once and returning her attention back to Erza. Makarov eyed the woman with curiosity. He knew she didn't ask that question randomly and deduced that someone back in her world had a similar nickname and likely had a salamander as a pet or partner. "Damn, deal," Naruto said, re-equipping a shield just as Natsu launched himself at him. "Naruto. Fight me." He screamed, only for his response to be a loud metallic thump and ringing sound following it like a gong had been rung. "Try and make it fast, love," Naruto said as he grabbed a hold of the Dragon Slayer's ankle and drug him through the hole the lieutenant had made. Natsu wanted a spar, then he would get one. Most of the guild went to watch one of their strongest members at work, while others simply went back to their business, while Erza followed the still limping council messenger out the door and off toward the council chambers. Dragon Slayer? The shinobi thought, what kind of world were these people from? The thought of dragons flying about was strange, but some, like Hashirama, seemed to want to visit the place for themselves. "Think we'll see a dragon this chapter?" Sai asked, hoping to get some inspiration for his drawings. Sasuke shook his head. "Unlikely, but I've been wrong before." Naruto stood across from Natsu as the Dragon Slayer began bouncing back and forth on his feet, hyping himself up for the spar to come. Their audience was pretty sizable. The Strauss siblings, Team Shadowgear, Gray, Happy, Lucy and easily another dozen sets of eyes watched as Makarov told both fighters the rules. As the master spoke, Naruto removed his shirt, showing off the tattoos, and more impressively for the now blushing girls, his physique. Even Lisana, who wasn't actually interested in her teacher, romantically had a slight blush. She couldn't lie, out of all the men in their guild, Naruto clearly trained himself physically more than any of the rest of them. "Let's just fight already," Natsu shouted, cutting off Makarov as he was lecturing the boys. The master sighed, but nodded before waving a hand to start the match. Natsu rushed Naruto right out the gate, only for Naruto to sidestep him and fold the pincat over his leg in a brutal kick that tossed him into the air. With a quick spin, he snapped out his other leg, launching the younger boy like a cannon back across the clearing and into a couple of trees. "That was anticlimactic," Naruto deadpanned. "He just kicked the man away like that." "Just wait, it'll get you right now," Natsu said confidently, staring at the image in front of them. He hadn't even used his magic yet, this time would be different. "Come on Natsu, use your head, I'm not even using magic yet," Naruto said with a mildly disappointed tone that worked just as planned and riled the Dragon Slayer up. From where she watched on the sidelines, Lucy was astounded. So this was one of the two that Levi and the others were talking about yesterday. He was amazing, not even using magic yet, and already he had Natsu on the ropes, plus seeing how he looked with his shirt off, then looked wild and unrestrained, but not like Natsu, who was, well, he was stupid. It was more like Naruto was simply primal and full of energy and life. "I'm not stupid," Natsu grumbled. Lucy chuckled nervously. She was still rather new to the guild, and she hadn't counted on Natsu hearing her thoughts. She wouldn't get kicked out of the guild, now would she? "Yes you are," Gray confirmed, incredibly so, actually. Before they could begin to argue once again, their heads were forced down by Makarov, who could see the incoming brawl coming. They would not embarrass themselves in front of their dimensional friends. "They'll show you," Natsu roared as he blasted forward again, getting only a sigh from Naruto. Instead of stepping around him, Naruto swung a punch that sent Natsu spinning for a second before Naruto tangled up his limbs and tightly wrapped his own arms around the boy. Then with a jolt, he performed a suplex, slamming the fiery boy into the dirt face first. As he climbed to his feet, Naruto shook his head in disappointment before releasing another sigh. "What did I just tell you about using your head?" Naruto asked. Natsu surprised him slightly by his quick recovery before the pincat tried to grab Naruto's head and hit him with a head, but instead Naruto caught him by his hair, stopping his head from finishing the arc to connect with his own skull. "That's not what I meant, but by all means enjoy the result of that move," Naruto said before headbutting the brat himself, dropping him onto the ground in a moaning heap on the ground. Naruto cheered. That move had worked on Gaara once too. People really underestimated how effective headbutts were. "I'd still like to see more of my magic, I still don't even know what it is," he whined shortly after. "I'm sure you'll understand the more we read, young man," Makarov said in a grandfatherly tone, the same tone he used when speaking with their own Naruto. "I dare say it's quite the powerful asset you have." "This isn't working out, Gray," Naruto called, making the ice mage pale drastically. "Why yeah?" Gray asked. "You're on Natsu's team for this bar now, Erza told me you guys are on a team together with her now or something," Naruto continued. "What? No, he began, only for a grinning Kana to shove him forward toward the waiting blonde nightmare. Slowly Gray took his place beside Natsu, who slowly stood to his feet. Normally both would have complained about not needing the other, but Natsu was still smarting from the quick succession of blows that would have laid out most opponents, and Gray could remember training with Naruto as a kid. This was about to be a lesson in determination, even if Naruto was still toying with them. Sasuke's Sharingan deactivated. It was clear he wouldn't be getting any sort of information from this battle. Putting on his bored expression once more, he rested against the comfortable back of the chair and crossed his arms across his chest. "I don't know if I should be insulted that he stopped paying attention when I joined or not," Gray said, commenting on Sasuke's demeanor change. Natsu laughed. "If I was him, I'd lose interest too. This should be more fair, right?" He called over to the two younger boys, getting a slight flinch as he re-equipped a bow staff into his hands and expertly spun it around his upper body before dropping into a ready stance. Lucy wasn't sure how to describe the fight before her as Naruto engaged the younger two with his weapon. It was so fast and brutal she wanted to look away, but at the same time she found that she couldn't, as Naruto looked to be using the two boys as balls and his staff as a bat. She finally couldn't process anymore and turned to Mira and her siblings for help. "What the hell?" she asked, getting a set of laughter from all three siblings. "Well, what did you expect? Hess called the king of the fairies for a reason," a voice beside Lucy pulled her attention up to Happy. Naruto glared at his friends for once again chuckling at the nickname had been given. Oberon was cool, but being called the king of fairies was really giving them ammunition against him. "You're lucky the bingo book is all but obsolete now," Sai said with a smile. "I can imagine what your entry would say." "I can imagine what your entry would say," Naruto mocked. "How about we let Erza continue reading?" Looking at the woman, he shot her a smile, one that she happily returned. The two stared at each other for a moment before Makarov coughed in an exaggerated way to get their attention. With a wave of his hand, Erza got the hint and turned back to the book. I know it's just that, well I don't know, it seems so insane. I thought Natsu and Gray were so strong before, but now I can't help but think, she trailed off as she watched Gray go sliding painfully across the clearing. Can't help but think that you're weak? Lysana asked. Lucy sadly nodded, getting a small giggle from the girl. Don't worry about it, he does that to all of us at times. I don't really think he realizes the influence he has with the guild. He inspires you to do better though, trust me, she continued. That's right, you're his student right? Lucy asked. Yep, I couldn't do hardly anything in a fight before he took me under his wing. I'm no powerhouse like he is, but I'm alright now thanks to him. Stick around, and the same thing will happen to you given some time, trust me, Lysana reassures Lucy. I suppose that's another thing you guys have in common, Sakura mentioned. Konohamaru stuck with you for a while, and next thing you know Hess defeating one of Pain's bodies. Hiruzen looked proud to hear that his grandson was doing good and also beamed in pride at the blonde man, had definitely come a long way from the little boy he used to know. He knew Konoha would be in good hands when the hat finally made its way to his head. The blonde smiled, Fairy Tail really was a special place. By now she was coming to really understand just how special it was. When she looked back at the match, only part of her was surprised it was over. Naruto standing over the pair of boys and looking disappointed, not in them, but at the lack of a good fight. I think that's enough for now. Erza should be finishing up with the council soon enough, and then she'll head straight home. Best I meet her there with some food ready for supper. The group dispersed, a couple helping Makarov take Natsu and Gray to Perusica, while Naruto headed home. He dug through the kitchen till he found all the supplies he needed and made a simple but hearty meal. He was right on the money, because the moment Erza stepped into the house, he could tell her earlier good mood had been dampened. What happened? He asked. Can we just talk about it another time? She asked with pleading in her eyes. Something must have happened, Sasuke muttered. Aburama rolled his eyes, obviously, but what? The former Avenger narrowed his eyes at the Senju but kept his composure. It won't do him any good to get into an argument with a dead man. If there's a council, my guess is they have an overinflated sense of importance and said something to piss her off, Minato guessed, either them or some outside party. Yeah, here, eat something, then we'll curl up on the couch for a movie or a nap or something, he answered. Erza clung to him then, a soft chaste kiss was shared, and it took a little bit of time to break the hug and for her to take her seat to enjoy the food. I had wanted to make something as a welcome home meal, she pouted lightly, brightening the atmosphere ever so softly. The pair enjoyed a homemade meal, and neither would recall what movie they tried to watch, both falling fast asleep in the familiar warmth of each other's embrace. The book disappeared from Erza's hands and suddenly materialized on Naruto's lap. Looking up, the host said nothing. So should I just continue where she left off, or do you guys want a break? He asked. In the end, the group decided on a brief 20-minute break in which everyone began to talk amongst themselves. Naruto chatted with Erza about what kind of magic he used and its applications, while Sasuke, and to his annoyance Tobirama, began to talk to Murahin about the intricacies of their magic system. So cake to her is like ramen to you, Sai commented. I eat other things, Naruto argued weakly. Sakura nodded, conceding that point but pressed on, yeah, but most of your diet has consisted of ramen with the occasional different meal, and that's only to get people off your back for your bad eating habits. They serve other things, she argued weakly. Really? What else besides desserts and other sweets do they have? He asked with a smirk as she wilted slightly. Tea? She suggested. Right, you remain adorable, but I want some real food, not just sweets and tea, Naruto said with a small chuckle. Fine, the Redeed pouted playfully before shrugging. Honestly, the best place to eat in Magnolia is probably the guild. Mira can whip something up for us. Naruto frowned slightly before he caught himself and attempted to hide his expression. Erza noticed it before he could though. She let out a long, suffering sigh and snatched up Naruto's hand between her own. Naruto, she really has changed from that brat all those years ago. She's my best friend even, Erza tried. I remember how Mira used to be, scary, Natsu shuddered. Well, the woman was kind now, back then it was a completely different person. Bray nodded, I know what you mean, you couldn't say anything around her without getting beat. Mira smiled at the two boys, you know I can hear you guys right. The two shuddered once again, this time because they were sure they saw the image of her Satan soul hovering behind her. Well, nope, I am your best friend, Naruto argued childishly as he let Erza pull him to his feet. You're far more than that and you know it. Murahin really is my friend though, Naruto, please give her a chance. I think you two could really get along if you did, Erza said with her big doe-like eyes making the man groan as he knew he would give in. Fine, but… And here is the caveat, Erza, if I do somehow end up getting poisoned by her because she has secretly been holding a grudge this whole time, I am holding it over your head for the rest of your life, Naruto said, causing her to giggle. Sure, you can do that, but when you end up falling for her and her food and try to bring her in for a threesome, I get to tell you I told you so, Erza replied. Naruto looked over at Erza with wide eyes, had she really just suggested that? Mira likewise gave her redeeted friend a look that said she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. She glanced at Naruto and blushed slightly, the mental images of what she'd heard rang through her mind. The description of what Erza had gone through sounded like something that would certainly make any woman's day. The question now was if she was serious or just messing with a blonde. Naruto choked on air at that thought and glared at his girlfriend as she cackled at his reaction. She was far too playful today. Whatever, let's just go eat, I'm starving now, Naruto mumbled as he led the giggling Ritty toward the guild hall. The Fairy Tail Guild was as lively as ever, a couple of small brawls were going in the corners, singing and drinking were heard throughout the building, despite how early in the day it was and overall the building was crowded and in high spirits. Drinking first thing in the morning? Naruto questioned, Granny, you would fit in perfectly there. Naruto was fortunate Tsunade wasn't sitting next to him as he was sure he would have gotten a punch to the face for that. Naruto pulled Erza up to a booth and the couple slid in and waved over at the bar to call for their order. As expected, Mira strolled over with a broad smile, though it did become a little nervous when turned toward Naruto, who also had a somewhat tight smile directed back at the girl, until Lysana joined them, all dressed with an apron like her elder sister. Lysana, you work here now too? Naruto asked in surprise. Yeah, big sis here was willing to show me the ropes. It's a pretty good source of income between missions. I get to catch up with everyone in the guild. As long as you are enjoying it, I'm glad you get to spend more time with your sister. I know she missed you terribly, Erza said with a warm smile of her own, directed toward the sweetest of the Strauss family. I'm sorry for that, Naruto offered toward Mira, causing the older girl to blink in shock. No, don't apologize, you went to another world to find Lysana and took her under your wing as a student, you don't ever need to apologize to me in regards to her, I trust her and you completely, Mira said, getting a surprised look from Naruto at the passion the woman was speaking with. Just how different was she if they're this surprised? Hashirama asked. Very, all the members of Fairy Tail replied at the same time. The disappearance of her sister changed her, but Naruto wasn't around to experience that change. To him, she would still be relatively the same as when he left, so I imagine this is quite the shock to him, Makarov replied. Afterward, an awkward silence descended onto the table for a moment during which no one wanted to make too much eye contact. Just as the silence became unbearable, an unexpected hero came to the rescue. Naruto. I challenge you, so get your ass up and fight me. Natsu roared when he saw Naruto. As the pink-haired loudmouth sprinted toward Naruto, Oberon gently pushed Mira and Lysana out of the path of the fire-breathing projectile. Just as he reached the spot Mira had previously been standing, Naruto's foot snapped out and sent the boy up through the ceiling of the building and out somewhere into the town. Happy went flying after him, both to pick on and check on him. Brat, he huffed, though he was happy that Natsu had interrupted whatever the hell it was they had been doing prior to his attack. Natsu never changes, Lysana said with a smile, not seemingly the slightest bit worried about the boy she had a special connection with. That's good, he might get on people's nerves and cause a lot of trouble, but he's honest to a fault, and while he might be kinda dumb, he can liven things up, Naruto said with a smile. I really just got complimented and insulted in the same breath, Natsu pouted, causing his guildmates to laugh. I also don't cause people a lot of trouble. The members of Fairy Tail looked at him with faces of disbelief. Even Gray, who participated in getting on people's nerves, couldn't believe what he'd just heard. I'm not even one of them, and I know that's a lie, Kakashi commented. The kid reminded him of a reskinned Guy or Lee, so he already knew what kind of headaches they caused. Yeah, so what did you two want to order? We have some chowder and hot ham and cheese sandwiches for the special, so it's cheaper, Mira brought up. Oberon and Titania made their orders and enjoyed the atmosphere of their guild while they waited, chatting idly, neither really paying too much attention to their surroundings or the pair of brown eyes that were curiously flicking over to them time and again as the pair ate. Lucy tried her best not to stare at them, but when they finished eating and Erza stood up and began making her way directly over to her, the blonde panicked slightly. Lucy, what are you doing? Erza asked as Lucy tried her best to act nonchalant. Oh Erza. When did you come in? What a surprise, not that it would be a surprise that you are in the guild being as you are the Titania and everything, I mean I'm sure you are always here, well that's not to say you just lays around her all day, it would be cool if you did though, I mean who would tell you no. Are you after all, Lucy rambled while Erza continued to blink at her with a confused stare. Sorry, I just have been trying to work up the nerve to ask you and Oberon to bail me out of this mess Natsu got us into. Just before Naruto punted him through the roof, he signed us up for some quest to hunt down a monster terrorizing farms near Joshire Station. I know Natsu is pretty strong, but from what it sounds like a couple wizards have already been defeated by the monster, and I just wanted to make sure we could handle it." Lucy vomited the words up quickly. "Geez, is she always like this?" Naruto asked, causing the blonde to jolt back in shock as she hadn't noticed he had joined them. "The girl is probably not used to that kind of thing," Sakura said, defending Lucy. "Not everyone is like you or Sasuke who will go head on against anything." Naruto blinked in confusion. "Why are you telling me though? I'm not there." "You kind of are, that's you," Tsunade pointed out. Naruto shook his head. "Hess him, and me." "That's what I just said," the blonde Hokage repeated. "Are they always like this?" Mira whispered to Sasuke. The Uchiha pinched his nose and ignored the pats on the back Sakura was giving him due to his reaction, more than he'd like to deal with. "A little bit, she seems a bit worse than usual today though," Erza commented. "Why though?" Naruto asked, turning to face Lucy who had just finished scowling at him for scaring her. "It's Natsu's fault, he has been telling her all about all the times you beat him up when you were kids," Happy said as he flew in, dragging a groaning Natsu with him. "Beat him up? I didn't do that," Naruto said, a little offended by the suggestion. "Yeah, the only reason Naruto ever beat him at Alice cause Natsu literally asked for it, challenging him over and over," Gray said from the booth behind Lucy, scaring her again and causing her to jump again and begin glaring at the ice mage. "Anyway, so you want us to come with you on this mission?" Erza asked as Lucy turned back to face the royal couple. "Can't really be mad if he went to ask for it," Hashirama commented. "Yeah, but he punted him through the ceiling," Tsunade told her grandfather, only for the shinobi under her command to give her a flat stare. "Granny, I've seen you punch people out of the window for sneezing the wrong way," Naruto pointed out. Natsu's eyes widened. This lady was potentially worse than Erza. "Yes, please, Gray, you too. I heard that there might be more than one monster even. I don't really know what to expect other than this mission was taken by some wizards in the past and they all failed miserably," Lucy said worriedly. "I needed a quest to get back into the swing of things anyway. What do you say, Erza?" Naruto asked the Redeed. "I'm always happy to help a fellow guildmate when I can." "Sure, we'll join you," Erza agreed. But Gray began only to be interrupted. "Gray, you carry Natsu home and help him pack, then you two and Happy meet the three of us at the train station. Lucy will need you there when we add our names to the registry so that it doesn't look like we're poaching jobs," Naruto said, ignoring the flabbergasted look Gray gave him at being voluntold into something again. "I know the feeling," Sai said, "thought it worked out well for him since he made some good friends, he was well used to being told what to do." Gray shook his head. "I'm not sure you do, they're slave drivers, I'm more of a mule that can use ice to them." Team 7 blinked in surprise. Ice? They instantly remembered Haku, who was proficient with ice, and wondered how Gray stacked up. "Can you travel through the ice?" Naruto questioned. "I can travel across it, I never thought about through it." Sakura knew where Naruto was going with this and added on, "Try making a dome out of Nella of ice and see if you can travel through them, it would certainly help you out if you were able." Makarov and Erza thought that seemed too specific to be just an idea. They must have known someone who can do that, whoever it was, they left an impression, the old man thought. But that the group all set out to complete their preparations. Jashir Station was near the end of the Eastern Line Railroad, that meant it wasn't a terribly long journey, but depending on the mission they might have to stay at one of the surrounding villages for a few days to make sure they did the job correctly, so each member of the team went and packed up their clothes and other necessities. Naruto also had to go and tell his student that he would be away on a mission. She was more or less finished learning what she could from him anyway, but it was common courtesy to at least let her know. Plus, like any dedicated apprentice, she often checked in on her teacher to make sure he was doing fine. Lysandra had stopped doing that on the second day after their return, as she realized why it was that Naruto wasn't coming to the guild as often as she was. She also learned why Erza was also absent at the same time. Within an hour the team was assembled at the train station. Natsu complained loudly about having to suffer through transportation. After a couple of moments of trying to explain to the Dragon Slayer that they could walk all the way to Jashir Station on foot in the time frame that they needed, Naruto became fed up and drove a fist into the younger boy's gut, knocking him out. He easily caught him as he fell and slung the pink-haired terror over his shoulder with ease. "Much less tolerant of people, I see," Sasuke commented to the blonde. Naruto rubbed the back of his head in slight embarrassment. "I'm sure it's something between us, maybe he punches me back randomly." Natsu denied this vehemently. "If I tried that I would get skinned by Erza." "No wonder you two make such a great couple," Lucy commented at the sight. "What do you mean?" Naruto asked. "Oh, Erza did the same thing to help Natsu deal with riding the train when we took the Eisenwald quest with her," Lucy explained. "Wait, this helps him deal with transport, that's a great idea, smart thinking Erza," Naruto complimented while Lucy stared at the tall blonde man in horror. Naruto had no rebuttal for what had just been said. That wasn't really him, but he wouldn't do something like that, no matter how many times he wanted to. It's actually a pretty efficient method of shutting people up, I did it to Sujetsu a few times, Sasuke replied. Sakura and Tsunade both nodded as well, women of their temper had done this on numerous occasions to patients, not that that info would ever get out. Wait, did he just knock out Natsu cause he was annoyed by him then? Lucy screamed in her mind, it was true, Fairy Tail really was a guild of monsters, and the scary part was she somehow fit in. While Lucy had a mild existential crisis, Naruto and Erza led the group onto the train, and Naruto convinced his girlfriend to tell him about this Eisenwald quest Lucy had mentioned, as they rode to their destination. So, you guys fought and defeated a demon of Zeref? Naruto asked seriously, catching even Erza a bit off guard, though the Redeed recovered quickly and nodded back with a stoic look on her face. Lysana and I encountered two of them on our way back home, both within Fiori's borders, there is no way that this is a coincidence, Naruto said with a frown. What do you think is going on then, Naruto? Gray asked the older boy. I couldn't say, I have a few ideas I guess, but they are all sort of crazy, though some are more worrisome than others, Naruto answered Gray, however he shot Erza a glance at that, getting an understanding look from his girlfriend, she knew the worrisome ideas he was talking about, the same thoughts had given her nightmares before. Zeref? Tobirama questioned. He was the strongest dark mage in the world, Makarov replied seriously, though Hess long gone, some of the demons he created have stayed around. The shinobi were reminded of Kagaya, or rather Zetsu, he was the living being that had remained after she had been sealed away, the thought of someone like her in that world filled them with worry. Zeref wouldn't have been mentioned for no reason. Does the Magic Council know about the fact that more demons of Zeref have been coming around? Gray asked. You know they are more concerned with their image than actual issues, they might know, but even if they did, if they consider the demons contained, they might just place a bounty on the demon and label it as something else and hope the guilds take care of it, actually, kind of like this job, would be a perfect cover for taking care of a demon, Naruto said thoughtfully. No way. Lucy groaned, why would you say that now, it's definitely gonna be true. Relax Lucy, what's the worst that could happen? Gray asked, causing the blonde to nearly scream at him. Shut up Gray. You're making it worse. Lucy bellowed. Lucy is right, you know. Tsunade agreed, now you've pretty much doomed the mission. Gray waves her off though he looked uncertain, I'm sure like most stories it's exaggerated, we're gonna be fine. The shinobi glanced at each other and withheld a sigh, they didn't realize that with Naruto there, things won't be that easy. I know you guys aren't thinking negatively about me, the shinobi shook their heads, minus Tobirama and Sasuke who freely admitted they were, their words caused them to stare at each other and frown. Lucy calm down, we're all here, it's going to be a piece of cake while we're together, Erza said as she jokingly pulled a plastic wrapped slice of cake from her bag to enjoy, Lucy simply whimpered as Gray and Naruto both chuckled at Erza's joke. Do I want to know how long you have carried that around with you to make that joke? Naruto asked with a big grin. Probably not, Erza said simply as she dug into her treat. Joshua Station. Team Royal stepped off the train at the small station and took in the countryside just beyond, it was mostly farmland with a few small wooded areas, as Naruto continued to carry Natsu like a sack under one arm, he led the small group down off of the platform and toward one of the few buildings built alongside the station. Team Royal, Naruto repeated, I like the sound of that, maybe we can make something like that stick with me. You're the king of fairies Naruto, nothing will change that, Sai replied with a smile. Naruto grit his teeth, wanting nothing more than to wipe that smirk off his face, a hand on his lap from Erza stopped that train of thought, she just looked at him and shook her head. Don't let them get to you, it's a good nickname. Grand Heights Resort. Lucy read off the building's title, it's a joke name right? It's not even a real inn, it's a house. It'll do as a place to stay for the quest, plus we can hopefully get some leads as to what we are dealing with here, Naruto said. As they entered the building they were surprised to find that the little house was crowded with people, farmers mostly, pushing their way through the crowd to what appeared the most like a front counter. Behind it sat a young woman with brown hair who smiled awkwardly and apologetically at the group approaching them. I'm sorry, but as I'm sure you can see we have no vacancy, our inn wasn't made for so much traffic at once, the girl said. I see that, what's going on? Erza asked. Out-of-towners. That's rare, anyway everyone is trying to get out of the area, but train tickets have shot up in price with demand, it's terrible really, the girl explained. Everyone is trying to leave town. Kakashi hummed. Maybe one of the demons they mentioned is around, Minato hypothesized. Price gouging when folks are trying to survive. That's pretty low, Naruto said with narrowed eyes. That's what Pa and I thought too, that's why we opened the inn up for them all to stay till they figure something out for themselves, soon though we won't be able to do anything more for them all, she seemed very distraught about that fact. You and your father seem like good people to take in others like this, Lucy said with a smile, trying to ease the girl's troubled mind. Hopefully we can help to alleviate the issue some as well. We're here because we took over a quest that has been floating around for a few weeks, something about a monster attacking the farms and hamlets out here. Any information you can give us about that?" Naruto asked. The girl grew more worried at that. She began to shake her head at the mere thought of more people going after the monster. "You just made things worse, son," he said. Naruto sighed. Things were already going bad. This was just proving what everyone already thought. "You can't, it's already killed 7 wizards that were sent to handle it. It's taken out entire hamlets and farms have been destroyed in single nights. I don't think anyone short of a wizard saint could stop it," she said in worry. "Wizard saint?" Tobirama asked. "10 of the most powerful mages on the continent," Erza informed them. Everyone instantly thought of a certain organization. Well, it sounded good on paper. When 10 people that strong came together, it was usually not for good. Maybe this place would be different, however. Sasuke was now intrigued by these wizard saints. So far he hadn't seen anything remarkable. For these to be the top 10, they had to have some incredible magic. "She's right," another voice cut in, pulling the attention of the group to a farmhand that seemed to have become little more than a living breathing bruise. "I assume you've seen this monster?" Gray asked. Nope, I turned and ran the moment everyone started screaming. I just got run over by my fellow villagers when I tripped," the man said sheepishly. "Sorry about that, Tom," a voice called out from the back of the crowded room. "Ah, water under the bridge, Marco, no harm done," Tom replied back, causing the fairy tale wizards to look at one another as the man brushed off his near-death experience so easily. "So we still don't know what we're dealing with then," Gray said. Natsu and Naruto both withheld chuckles at the image that appeared of the man being trampled. It seemed more comical than anything else. "I know you're not laughing at that man's unfortunate accident," Minato tried to chastise. He didn't get the chance to be a parent once, but here, maybe now he would be able to, if only for a moment. Unfortunately, even Hashirama found himself chuckling along, which only fueled the others to laugh as well. "Who cares?" Natsu, who had only just woken back up, roared from his spot in Naruto's arms. "Here's a monster that needs to be slayed and I'm all fired up," the Pinket hollered. "Shut up, Natsu, you're being a bad house guest," Naruto said as he shook the boy, roughly causing him to become sick briefly until Naruto set him down on his own 2 feet. "I can tell you some things about that damned monster," an elderly voice spoke up then. The crowd parted slightly, allowing room for an old woman to slowly approach the team from the back of the room. She was hunched over with age, but had clearly been a strong and respectable woman in her youth, judging by the look her old gray eyes held. Naruto opened his mouth only to have it snapped shut by Sakura. By now the fairy tale was well aware of the familiar relationship the 2 blondes had and was certain he'd be punted just like Natsu if he finished that sentence. "It comes every night at sunset, thunders up to whatever farmhouse or homestead it wants to tear into, and just starts ripping into it like hogs do their slop. Doesn't really come after folks in particular, unless they make a lot of ruckus or attack it. Damn thing is some sort of twisted minotaur or something, except giant by all measures. Taller than the biggest barn around here and fast as can be," she said, jabbing at the team with her walking stick to emphasize the points about how large the creature was. "Any idea where it is going to attack next?" Erza asked. "That's easy, it's been following the same path along the river since all this nonsense began. No clue where it will go after that, but next will be the Riddle family farm. It's abandoned, but the damned creature hasn't cared about such a thing in the past," the old woman said. "Thank you, if you could all tell us about some of the specific features of the Naruto," began only to pause. "Where is Natsu?" he asked his team. They all turned to look at the empty spot their teammate had previously inhabited a moment before. "I'm willing to bet all the money in my pocket he went to Riddle Farm," Gray facepalmed. "The fool's bet if there ever was one, Gray," Mir replied with an amused smile. They really should seen this coming. "Heh, I'll show you guys, by the time you catch up I'll have taken care of it already," Natsu yelled enthusiastically. Despite not being from their world, Naruto couldn't help but doubt that statement. "That idiot," Lucy cried out. "Leave it to Flame Brain to run off half-cocked, we better catch up to him before he gets himself killed, guys," Gray pointed out. Naruto frowned. He didn't like going into a possible fight with as little information as they had, but their teammate hadn't left them with much of a choice. He didn't say anything to the others, they followed him as he took off on the trail of their, quite literally, hot-headed teammate. "Another difference," Kakashi noted. Sai agreed, "You usually go straight into battle without information, the only exception was Pain. You guys are always bringing up the past, I'm different now." Not even Minato believed that, his personality took after his mother, and that was all the proof he needed. Thankfully they caught up to him before they even reached the river and found him headed in the wrong direction, back toward where the already destroyed farms already were. "Natsu, what are you doing?" The old lady said that the monster was going to attack that farm over there tonight, Happy tried to say as he pointed at the next, still standing set of buildings aloft the river. Maybe so, but that monster is this way, it smells weird, but kinda familiar too, Natsu said. Naruto paused at that thought, he hadn't realized that perhaps Natsu's nose was good enough to track down this monster before it caused any more damage to the local homes. Lead the way Natsu, Naruto said, simply getting a nod from the boy and odd looks from the others. Erza blinked for a moment before she seemed to understand and nodded to herself. She quickly caught up to Naruto and kept pace with him. It had been a while, but she was itching to fight side by side with Naruto once again. Alright, maybe now we'll see some action, Sasuke said, leaning forward. Mira chuckled at the reaction, she knew how much of an interest in magic had taken, and despite how well he hid it up until now, he was anxious to see it used. She didn't have to wait long, both she and Naruto re-equipped their weapons as they came face to face with a demonic creature looming before them. The old woman's description hadn't done the monster justice, it was easily twice as tall as the guild hall back in Magnolia was. It had a muscular body with too many appendages attached to it and an odd off-white skin color that contrasted strongly with the patches of thick black fur that covered random spots of its body. The head of the creature really did look like a bull's, it was little wonder the woman had said it looked like a minotaur. The creature also had 6 arms, 2 larger sets at its shoulder and another smaller set on its chest. One set of the arms on its shoulders didn't end in hands though, instead ending with long terrible looking claws. Oh, God, it's gross, Lucy said in horror. It's a demon from the Book of Zareth, Naruto hissed out. Gray and Erza's eyes both darkened heavily, and the group as a whole readied themselves for a fight. Naruto himself was frowning. Something big was happening in Fiori, and he couldn't figure out what exactly, whatever it was, though it was bringing old problems to the surface. Demons like this were not supposed to be as common as they are suddenly becoming lately. Something behind the scenes has to be letting them out, Tobirama hypothesized. Hashirama looked uncharacteristically serious and nodded. If they're not supposed to be common, then someone has to be setting them loose, but for what purpose? That's what we'll need to find out, Makarov responded, as long as we're seeing the future, we can prevent a number of things and be prepared. Naruto was happy for them, but wished this had been available just prior to his birth, maybe his parents would have been ready for the attack. What do we do? Lucy asked as she stared up at the monster that seemed to be ignoring them entirely. What we came here to do, Natsu, take a crack at it, Naruto declared, getting a wild cackle from the dragon slayer. Let's start with a heavy hitter first. Fire dragon roar. Natsu screamed as he drew in a deep breath and released a massive blast of flame toward his target. No hand signs needed, Hiruzen noticed, that would have been quite the edge back home. As the fire struck the creature, it stumbled back and blinked as if surprised before chuckling in an inhuman tone of voice. The fire slowly dissipated, leaving only a small section of the creature's chest seared. Oh, so a new set of wizards have arrived to play. Thank goodness, I've been ransacking these farms and villages for weeks, and all they've sent to try and get rid of me were 7 mediocre fools that hardly lived up to the name. I had begun to think that this plan of mine wasn't as foolproof as I thought, the demon said. It can talk, Sai pointed out. Not sure why you're so surprised, this is hardly the first time we've come across talking animals and whatnot, Naruto shot back. Erza paused, you heard Happy the cat talk, but this is what surprised you? Being a tad bit embarrassed, Naruto simply nodded. Erza had to concentrate down below before she flung herself at him. Her mind constantly struggled with the fact that this wasn't her Naruto, even if he did look like him and kiss like him. The group of wizards didn't engage in conversation, the only engagement they wanted was combat with the monster. Naruto and Erza each sprinted toward opposite flanks of the monster, gaining his interest, but before he could do anything about it, a lance of ice slammed into his jaw from the front, followed by another ball of fire, similar to the one that had initially gained his attention. Gray, Lucy, Summons, Taurus, and Natsu all attacked from the front, while Lucy and Happy remained further back as moral support for the impossible battle that was beginning before them. Naruto lashed out with his sword against the creature's leg, scoring a painful blow and dropping the giant beast to its knee. Just as he was about to continue on through, the monster's claw swiped down, and its titanic strength ripped his sword from his grip and sent it flying away from him, narrowly dodging backward from the strike to avoid letting it impact his own body. Naruto began avoiding the creature's strikes as he planned a better move. He sucked air through his teeth in agitation as he watched the wound he had given the monster heal in seconds. On Erza's side of the fight, things were going much the same. Sadly, unlike Naruto, she couldn't dodge out of the way of the monster's strike toward her in time and took the blow directly, sending her careening away. Her armor shattered, but thankfully it did its job, and Erza remained mostly undamaged by the attack, having to re-equip again. Erza dressed in faster armor that allowed her to not only attack faster, but hopefully avoid the demon's attacks altogether. So your thing is different types of armor, Naruto pointed out. Erza nodded proudly, but didn't get the chance to elaborate as the host made sure to remind them to stay on topic. At the break I can tell you more about it, she promised. It'll hold you to that. This is getting nowhere. Gray shouted as another wave of his ice attack seemed to just fall away from the demon's body as he shook himself loose. "Wait, I got it, let me try this, Fire Dragon's brilliant flame." He roared, slapping two hands filled with flame together before launching an even larger fireball at the demon's chest. Once more though the fire did little more than stagger the creature. "We already saw that it didn't work, why did you just try it again, you moron?" Gray shouted. "That is a completely different attack," Natsu replied. "No, it wasn't, it was just bigger than the last one, and it still did nothing." Gray hollered back only for both boys to scream in fear and roll out of the way of an oversized foot, slamming down right where they had been arguing at beforehand. "Just give up. You little humans can't do anything to me, I am the demon Talmos, the quaking thunder. Quake as I draw," the monster boasted. "Why does it feel the need to monologue?" Sasuke wondered. Mira shrugged, "It's a villain thing, most of them do it." "Shut the hell up, you overgrown dairy cow." Naruto bellowed as he bent down and slammed a palm into the ground. "You little ant, try this." Talmos roared as he lifted a foot to stomp down onto Naruto, only for a thick webbing of vines to spring forth from the ground and ensnare the creature, pulling it off balance and slamming it onto its back against the ground. Natural Emmett began with surprise in its voice, only to be interrupted yet again. "Yeah, exactly as you think," Naruto said confidently as his vines began to tighten on Talmos' body, slowly constricting like massive pythons. "Wait, you can use wood style?" Hashirama asked excitedly. "He can apparently," Erza replied, wondering when he'd learned that, or from who rather. "This isn't enough, wizard," Talmos snarled as he began cutting himself free with the giant claws he possessed. "That's just the opening act," Naruto said calmly as suddenly the vines sprouted thick thorns the size of a full-grown man, each stabbing into the demon, painfully eliciting a scratch of agony from it. "Hey Natsu, you like hollering the names of your attacks all the time, well, I named this Mother's Rip Saw," Naruto said, getting a confused look from Natsu. "Mother's Rip Saw? Why?" Natsu asked. "'Cause it comes from Mother Nature, and it does that," Naruto said while snapping his fingers and causing the tightly bound vines to suddenly twist and tangle in such a fast and furious manner that the demon wasn't just killed, it was absolutely minced into pieces. Hashirama wisted, had never made a saw out of plants before, but it seemed like a pretty unique idea if he wasn't already dead, had have been taking notes to potentially use that technique. "Damn, talk about overkill," Sakura commented. Bray looked over at the pink-haired girl with a raised eyebrow. From what the shinobi had said, she was usually the first to destroy things, not wanting his head to be one of the things on her list, he kept his mouth shut. The rest of the group grimaced at the brutal nature of the attack. It worked, and the demon was definitely dead, but that attack was even more terrifying than the demon itself had been. The fact that Naruto so casually handled it and seemed used to the violence of it added on to the disturbing nature. "Stop standing around, you guys, we should go tell the people the good news, they're going to have to rebuild for a while, but things should be pretty much back to normal for them from now on," Naruto said as he started walking back toward the makeshift inn. The group stared after him for a while as Naruto walked away. Erza soon followed after him, catching up and walking beside him, easily getting over the display. The others weren't quite up to that. "Naruto is kind of a scary guy," Lucy pointed out. "Yeah, well that's Oberon for you I guess," Gray said with a shrug of his shoulders. He still had a haunted look in his eyes though. "They're traumatized now," Tobirama noted. "How weak if something like that had them shaken up." Hashirama noted the tone in his brother's voice and shook his head. "They're not trained killers like we had to be, they probably don't see this kind of thing often." "Natsu, you have to stop challenging Naruto to fights, you are gonna die," Happy warned his friend. "Are you kidding? That whole show just makes me want to fight him even more," Natsu said before he slammed his fists together and sprinted off toward the blonde. "Hey Naruto, when we get back home fight me," Natsu shouted only to catch a fist to the gut, this time by Erza, and have Naruto slinging him over his shoulders like a sack of potatoes. "At least it will be quiet on the ride home," Gray said with a sigh as he, Lucy, and Happy caught up to the others. "See, they're fine," Naruto said with a wave of his hand. Lucy highly doubted the blonde knew what fine was, there was no way she'd be fine seeing something like that. "They're strong, nothing short of death will stop Natsu," Erza replied. "Thanks for watching."